When people hear that I'm a forester, and a lot of times they ask me if winter is like my off season. And the answer is actually that it's just the opposite. Winter to forest management and logging is sort of like summer is to farming. It's this concentrated period of time when this huge amount of work gets done. And the reason for that is because the ground is frozen. So why we want to do a lot of forest management work when the ground is frozen is that for the most part, we're utilizing this logging equipment, which is pretty heavy, to extract the wood from the forest. Now, frozen ground and especially snow does a lot to make logging easier. Skidders essentially drag trees out of the woods, and so when there's a little bit of snow, it creates less friction, and so it's easier for them to pull those trees out. But the most profound benefits of the winter logging season is that when the ground freezes, we can operate this equipment on sites that might be a little bit more wet without concerns about soil compaction or about root damage to trees. In our forestry vernacular, we refer to these areas with wetter ground or other conditions that make it so we need to harvest them under frozen winter conditions. We call that winter ground. Areas that are dry enough or become dry enough that they can be harvested when the soils are dry in the summertime, we call that summer ground. If you think of logging and logging equipment as something that is harmful to forests, you might be like, great, they can't get in the woods. But a lot of us foresters today practice forestry, which is ultimately about making forests healthier and more diverse, making them more resilient to the effects of climate change, providing habitat for wildlife and for our declining biodiversity. The fact that we can make this forest management commercial by producing wood and other forest products, which by the way are renewable resources, is a real asset. It's an asset to our climate, it's an asset to our biodiversity, it's an asset to the health of our forests. Otherwise, this work could only occur if landowners did it themselves or if they paid somebody to do it, which certainly wouldn't be affordable or accessible to everybody. That's not to say that forest management in any context is good. It can certainly be done in ways that are harmful to forests, but it can also be done in ways that are profoundly regenerative and positive. As I record this, it's January 14th, and even though I'm in the middle of a snow squall right now, the ground here is actually not frozen. We've had a couple 2-3 day stretches where the ground is frozen and then it warmed up again and rained. Used to be that winter logging season was really December through the middle of March. Now we usually think about it as the first of the year through about the end of February, although last year in some places, my land included, the ground never froze. So if we don't have these winter conditions, one of three things happens. We either try to access these areas with wetter ground that really need those frozen conditions at a different time of year, maybe dry summer conditions. We don't do the work at all, or we just say we need to get this work done and we end up pushing the conditions and causing soil impacts that we really don't want to cause. So not having these frozen conditions has impacts economically. The loggers, the truckers, the folks that rely on this time period to make a big portion of their income for the year. Ecological impacts, not allowing us to do the work that we want to do. And when people end up working in the woods, even when ground conditions aren't the best, it can have other impacts. It can have impacts to water quality if erosion is occurring or something like that. So what do we do about it? We can't obviously control the weather. What we can do is invest in trail systems that are more resilient. We can upgrade access infrastructure, skid trails, and truck roads, making it so that they're a little bit more resilient, and we can use them when soil conditions aren't perfect, or maybe use them in the summer rather than in the winter. We also really need to invest in things like water bars so that even if we need to operate on skid trails and access roads when conditions aren't the best, that we're not causing erosion or impacting water quality. The other thing that we can do is we can make an effort to freeze in skid trails, especially main trails. This is this process where you might go up once a day for a number of days and pull a single hitch of wood, compact the snow there, and then let it freeze overnight. And then even if it gets warmer, that skid trail will still be really frozen. We can also make sure that we're keeping loggers on main trails. So on main skid trails, a certain amount of compaction and soil disturbance is going to occur. It's okay. Those are going to be skid trails forever, and we're not trying to grow trees right there. So as long as those main trails aren't eroding, they're not discharging any sediment into any streams, as long as they're stable, we can tell loggers to keep the wheels of their machines on those main trails rather than having them back up to every tree and cause those soil impacts all throughout the woods. I think we need to recognize that these changes are becoming normal. And so just like giving our forest the tools to respond and adapt and be resilient to the effects of climate change, we need to be adaptive and resilient, and that includes the way that we manage our roads and trails.